On April of 2022, my friends and I were hanging out on Discord playing Splatoon and or Pokemon Unite, and one of us brought up a good question offhandedly. How long do you think it will take to get max ink painted on a single weapon? The math part of my brain instantly went on high alert, despite knowing that finding the true exact value would be difficult. My first attempt at this problem was riddled with errors, and it resulted in roughly 73 days of constant playing, but it made no sense. My friends and I decided to continue playing games and talking about other things, but this question remained at the back of my mind. Once we finished our nightly session, I tackled this problem yet again and concluded at a fairly reasonable result. 31.25 days on average to max out a single weapon. I told my friends about these findings and they teased me a bit, but it encouraged me to do a thorough analysis so that I could get a more exact value of not only one weapon, but every single multiplayer weapon in the game. My friends were excited to see me do this, so here we are. This is my suffering. There's a lot of variables and uncertainty that goes on in a Splatoon match, ultimately affecting the data to be collected. I want to address those first before I tackle the problem directly. 1. Maps and player skill affect how much turf they can paint. This uncertainty stems from the fact that people play this game differently, thus getting different numbers for painted turf. Individual player skill contributes to team skill, which is the difference between getting spawn camped or not. The former gives you plenty of ink to paint with, while the latter doesn't. In addition, each weapon and its sub and special combinations affect turf output. The regular blaster on Schellendorf Institute hardly has anything going for it. Unlike the Jet Squelcher on Anchovy Games, where you could sit on the platform and spam missiles until time runs out. 2. I am only considering Turf War as a mode the player will play. Unlike the ranked modes, this mode will always exactly end in 3 minutes. Therefore, this would eliminate the match time uncertainty. Examples of the match time uncertainty would be Rainmaker ending in 30 seconds after one bad play. Or you would have a Splat Zones match with a very long overtime.
Believe that they have still managed to hold on at this point with no penalty. They only need a couple more points as we go down to the last 10 seconds.
It's just so stressful. You want that yellow just to get full. All they want is the yellow to get up there so Jackpot can take it. It's going back and forth. Jackpot, no penalty. They take it. Oh, they could have just one more point. Could have solved it for them, but unfortunately, it's going to be going into overtime. They're still fighting tooth and nail right here. People jumping in team for Starburst. That's not going to happen. Oh my God.
3. I will not consider the match downtime into the final calculation. This downtime includes, but is not limited to, lobby matchmaking, Turf War map overview and results screen, waiting and doing nothing in the plaza, server maintenance, sleep, eating, work, school, etc. All of these interactions take up way more time than you think. I may not include this in the final calculation, but I'll show a side calculation of the downtime so you'll get a basic idea of how long they last and how it adds up very quickly. In addition, dying and respawning won't count as part of this downtime because you're technically still active in the turf war match. This also includes not being able to paint any new turf because it's impossible to always be painting something, especially if you and or your team is too good for the other team. 4. I am legitimately playing the game. Seriously, I am. I'm not going into a private battle with friends and farming ink, or engaging in squid parties with public matches. I am to play the game and attempt to win the match by painting the most turf, subduing the enemy team, and collecting the data on said match simultaneously. With there being 138 multiplayer weapons in this game to choose from, I would have to strike a balance between too little games, where the data would be inadequate, or too many games, where I'd get bored and exhausted. So I settled on playing 3 matches per weapon and collecting the average paint of those 3 matches, all while playing Duel of the Fates in the background to keep me hyped up. In my chart, I will also show the common map I played in the rotation. If the rotation changes, and I played both maps in the previous rotation in the first 2 games, then I will list all 3 maps I played next to that weapon. Weapon variants such as the Hero Slosher replica or the Octoshot replica will be counted as its own weapon, but it will share the data with the original weapon. This also applies for chargers and their scope variants. For example, my average turf painted for the Splat charger is 747p. This means that the Splatter scope and the Hero Charger replica would also be 747p. My reason for this is that there are reskins of existing weapons, though you could make the argument that scope chargers are different because they have a slightly longer range than non-scope variants, but this range is too small for it to make an important difference. After spending 3 months of playing Turf War on and off, I have gathered all the data that I needed. But before I share my final result, I would need to show my work with the basic math formula I made. The maximum amount of ink a weapon can paint as of the November 2017 update is 9,999,999p, or Pmax. By playing 3 turf war matches, we can get the average amount of turf painted, or P-average. These 2 variables will tell us the exact number of games rounded to the nearest integer to reach Pmax. Divide Pmax over P-average, and you'll get our result for that. Turf war matches last exactly 3 minutes, or T-match. Multiplying this result by the number of games would tell us exactly how long it will take to reach Pmax. Earlier, I mentioned match downtimes, which are scenarios where the player is forced to not play and only watch as the game does its magic. Now, the problem is, this downtime is never consistent. You could have a lobby that could fill in 10 seconds for one game, while the next game you spend 150 seconds or more just waiting for the last player to fill in. The only consistent times are the pre-game and post-game load and result screens respectively. This is the T-average downtime, and this is how you would apply it to the formula you see on the screen. I have collected the downtime data on a weapon by weapon basis, but as I said before, I'm not including it in the final calculation. You may be asking if the formulas apply to the 4 ranked modes, and I'd say yes, it can. In theory, you could play through every ranked game from start to finish without overtime or an instant game losing push, but this never happens because the ranked mode's objectives can cause the match to end quickly or stall until overtime. So in practice, T match would become T average match, thus creating some uncertainty to the match length, and it affects the overall final answer. In addition, these objectives make players focus less on painting, though splat zones may be an exception to this because it's turf war constrained to a small zone, so the turf painted would be identical to turf war or more. Rainmaker, however, is a different story due to its overall goal being completely different than what the series was initially designed for, painting turf. Map control is important in all modes, of course, but for better or worse, it's not a priority for many players based on my experience in Western X-Rank lobbies. With that aside, let's use some actual numbers and use this formula. For this example, I will use the Neo Splash-O-Matic because it is the first weapon I used for testing. Here we can get the number of games it will take to reach Pmax, which is 7,013 games. Multiplying this result by 3 minutes, and we will get 21,039 minutes of turf war. If we account for the average downtime, this number will go up to 28,636.41 minutes of turf war, adding 7,597.41 minutes to the initial calculation, showing that the variable downtime adds up very quickly. However, it is not a part of the turf war match itself, so I'll only include the initial calculation for the total sum. Here is my chart of my data organized for your viewing pleasure. If you want to see the full chart, I will include the link to this document in the description. In conclusion, by taking the sum of the number of days per weapon, I estimate that it will take at least 8.797 years to max out every single weapon in Splatoon 2. This is equivalent to 3,210.74 days, or 4,623,465.6 minutes of turf war. This is equal to 1,541,155 total games of turf war. All this is time of your life wasted. For context, the update that increased the max turf from 1 million minus 1 to 10 million minus 1 was on November 23rd, 2027. I finished making this report/video script at around August 11th, 2022. This is about 1,729 days from that November update. Splatoon 1 released on May 29th, 2015. It's only been 7 years, or exactly 2,627 days, since this amazing series has reached our hearts. This was my suffering.